Mary Thompson, 70 years old, had spent most of her life in New York, raising 3 children with her late husband, Henry. After his passing 10 years ago, she had kept herself busy with small part-time jobs, cooking, and looking after her grandchildren. But as time passed, her children grew busy with their own lives. Her eldest daughter, Susan, lived in Boston with her husband and children, while her son, Michael, worked in finance in Manhattan with his wife, Jessica. Mary felt increasingly isolated. Her visits to see Michael were short, filled with awkward silences and a tense atmosphere. Jessica, Michael's wife, never made her feel welcome, always busy with her own affairs and dismissing Mary with subtle comments that felt like cold daggers. The warmth she had once felt in her children's company seemed to slip away, and Mary began to wonder if the family she had devoted her life to had moved on without her. One afternoon, just as Mary was preparing to leave for a long-overdue trip to visit an old friend in Miami, she overheard a conversation that would change everything. Michael and Jessica were in the living room, discussing their financial situation. "You know, Mary doesn't have much left. That house of hers is worth something, but she has no other assets," Jessica said, her voice light but calculating. "We should have her sign it over to us now, while she's still capable of understanding things. If something happens to her, Susan will take over and we won't get a dime." Michael stayed silent, not challenging his wife's words. Mary's heart sank as she stood frozen at the door. The family she had raised, the family she had sacrificed everything for, was now treating her as a mere afterthought. She was no longer a mother to them. She was a burden, a potential cash cow. Without saying a word, Mary retreated to her room, packed her things, and left. She left a note, saying she was visiting her friend in Miami, but the truth was much deeper. She was leaving because she had finally realized her worth had been reduced to nothing more than a dollar sign. In Miami, Mary found a new sense of freedom. She spent her days painting, something she had loved doing when she was younger but had put aside to raise her family. She joined a local art group and made new friends who saw her for who she truly was. They didn't view her as an old woman in need of care. They saw her as a person with potential and dreams still to be fulfilled. The more time she spent away from her children, the more she felt her old self coming back. She had always defined herself through the lens of motherhood, but now she was beginning to discover who Mary Thompson was, without the labels of mother or grandmother. She started to travel, capturing the beauty of the world through her paintings, something she hadn't done in years. Her life began to take on a new light, a freedom she had never known before. Several weeks later, Mary received a call from Michael. His voice was soft, tinged with concern. "Mom, I've been thinking about you a lot. I'm sorry for how things have been. Jessica and I didn't mean to hurt you. I've been really busy, but I miss you." Mary listened, her heart torn. She hadn't expected this phone call, especially after what she had overheard. Part of her wanted to forgive Michael, but she knew that this moment of regret wasn't enough. The hurt ran deep, and she had spent too many years putting her own needs aside for her family. "I'm fine, Michael. I'm happy. I've been doing things for myself," she replied, her voice calm yet resolute. "I think it's time for me to live for me now, not just for all of you." Michael hesitated, then spoke again. "Mom, please come back. I miss you. We all miss you." Mary smiled softly, but her words were firm. "I'm not coming back, Michael. Not right now. I need time. I need to do things my way." Though Mary had decided to take control of her life, she was still a mother. In the weeks that followed, she received more calls from Michael and Susan, both apologizing for their actions, though Jessica's voice remained distant and cold. Mary knew that their apologies were motivated by guilt and the realization that they had pushed her away, but she was no longer the same woman who would forgive for the sake of peace. She began to make decisions for herself. She enrolled in an art course, something she had always wanted to do, but never had the chance to. She even started selling her paintings at local galleries, gaining recognition for her work. Slowly, but surely, Mary was building a life where her worth wasn't defined by her children's approval or by their expectations. Months passed, and Mary's life continued to flourish. She had traveled to Italy to study art, met new people, and even exhibited her paintings in several galleries. Her sense of independence grew, and her confidence soared. Then, one day, Michael called again, his voice thick with guilt. "Mom, I don't know how to say this, but we've made some mistakes. Jessica and we've been selfish. Please, come back. I want you to be a part of our family again." Mary, now at peace with herself, understood the importance of healing, but not at the cost of her own happiness. "I'm glad you understand, Michael. But I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back to be the person I once was. I've found a new path. I'm living for myself now. I won't be your caretaker anymore. I've lived that role for so long, and now it's time for me to live for me." One afternoon, after a long trip to a remote art retreat, Mary returned home to find Michael waiting for her at her doorstep. He had a sad smile on his face, and for the first time in years, he didn't look at her as if she was a burden. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle, "I understand now. I'm proud of you. You're living your life, and that's what I should have wanted for you all along." Mary smiled warmly. "It's never too late to find happiness, Michael. I've learned that the hard way. But now I've found it, and I'm going to hold on to it." And with that, Mary Thompson, the woman who had spent so many years sacrificing for her family, finally put herself first. She was no longer just a mother, a grandmother, or a caregiver. She was Mary, an artist, a woman with dreams of her own. Mary's life in the months following her decision to live for herself was filled with peace, creativity, and adventure. She continued to travel, and each new place brought her a sense of freedom she had never known before. Italy, France, and Spain, each country became another chapter in her rediscovery of self. She spent her mornings painting, capturing the landscapes and people she met along the way. The world was her canvas, and she no longer felt restricted by anyone's expectations. Yet, despite the joy she felt in her new life, Mary occasionally found herself missing the connection she once had with her children. It wasn't regret, but rather a quiet longing for the family bonds that had shaped her for so many years. She knew, however, that she could never go back to what it was before. One day, as Mary was painting in a small cafe in Paris, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from Susan. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot. I know things have been difficult between us, but I'd like to see you. Would you come to visit soon? We need to talk." Mary's heart skipped a beat. It had been months since she'd heard from Susan in any meaningful way. Her daughter had always been distant, but now it seemed like something had shifted. Mary debated for a moment, then replied, "I'd love to visit, Susan. Let's plan something soon." A few weeks later, Mary arrived at Susan's home in Boston. The meeting was long overdue, and both women were nervous. Mary had come to terms with her past and was ready to face her daughter again, but she wasn't sure what Susan wanted or what kind of relationship they could rebuild. When she stepped inside, Susan greeted her with a warm hug, a gesture Mary hadn't received in years. Susan looked different, older, yet softer. The tension between them that had always been there was still palpable, but there was an undercurrent of something new, a genuine desire to reconnect. Over tea, the two women talked about their lives, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. Susan explained how she had been caught up in her own life and responsibilities, and how much she regretted not being there for Mary in her later years. "I'm sorry, Mom," Susan said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never realized how much you were hurting. I was so focused on my own world that I didn't see yours falling apart. I miss you." Mary looked at her daughter and saw something she hadn't in a long time: vulnerability. The woman who once seemed so distant and cold was now open, raw, and genuine. "I missed you too, Susan," Mary said quietly, her voice soft but steady. "But I had to step away for a while. I had to live for myself, not just for you and Michael. It's been the best decision I ever made. I can't go back to being who I was, but maybe we can move forward." Susan nodded, her eyes full of tears. "I understand, Mom, and I respect that. I think I need to learn how to be independent too. You've shown me that it's never too late." As the days passed, Mary and Susan spent more time together, rediscovering the mother-daughter bond that had been neglected for so many years. They visited local art galleries, walked through Boston's historic streets, and shared stories of their lives that they had never told each other before. For the first time in a long while, Mary felt like she was being seen for who she truly was, not just as a mother or grandmother. Meanwhile, Michael began reaching out more, too. Though his initial attempts to reconcile with Mary had been met with firm boundaries, he realized how much he had taken her for granted. It wasn't until he saw how happy she had become, living her life on her own terms, that he truly understood the importance of Mary's independence. One evening, Michael called Mary. His voice was quieter than usual, filled with sincerity. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything we've gone through. I was wrong. I've taken you for granted. I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I've seen the way you've lived these past months, and I admire you more than I ever have. I hope we can find a way to rebuild our relationship." Mary paused, looking out at the setting sun from her apartment in Paris. She had heard the pain and regret in Michael's voice. He had grown, and that was all she could ask for. "Thank you, Michael," Mary replied. "I don't need to go back to what we had before, but I'm willing to try and rebuild what we can. It won't be easy, but we can start somewhere new." As time went on, Mary's relationships with both Susan and Michael gradually healed. They learned to navigate their roles in each other's lives with respect for the boundaries Mary had set. While she no longer allowed herself to be the caretaker, she still played an important part in their lives as a mother and grandmother. But it wasn't just her children who were learning from Mary. Her story of reinvention and resilience became an inspiration to others in her life. She was invited to speak at conferences for senior citizens, encouraging them to embrace their independence and pursue their passions. Through her art, she had found a new community of like-minded individuals who celebrated their later years as an opportunity for growth, not decline. Mary's work was being exhibited in galleries across Europe, and she was featured in several prominent magazines for her ability to start anew in her senior years. Her life had become a testament to the fact that it was never too late to live authentically, to pursue one's dreams, and to break free from the chains of expectations. As Mary stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon one chilly autumn morning, the wide expanse of the world before her felt endless. She had finally come to realize that the last chapters of her life would not be spent waiting for permission, but living fully, authentically, and unapologetically. The journey she had embarked on, from caring for her family to reclaiming her independence, was one that had taken years, but it had led her to this moment of peace. She knew there would still be challenges ahead. Her relationship with her children would continue to evolve, and there would be moments of pain and loss. But for the first time in her life, Mary felt ready to face whatever came her way. She had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, and now nothing could stop her from reaching her dreams. As she looked out over the canyon, Mary smiled to herself. The best is yet to come. As Mary settled into the rhythm of her life, one where every day was a new opportunity for adventure and creativity, she began to realize something important. Her life had become an open book, a source of inspiration not only for her children, but for others who had crossed her path. She had shown people that there was no expiration date on dreams, no age limit to begin again. With the success of her art exhibitions and growing recognition in the artistic community, Mary found herself invited to speak at more and more events dedicated to seniors finding purpose in their later years. She was now viewed as a trailblazer in the community of older adults, someone who had defied society's expectations of aging. She was no longer just a mother and grandmother. She was a beacon of hope, a living proof that life after 60 could be just as fulfilling, if not more, than the years before. At one of the events in New York, Mary spoke about the importance of pursuing passions and finding joy in the little things, even when it feels like the world expects you to fade quietly into the background. Her words resonated with everyone in the audience, and her story was shared widely, sparking conversations across the country. She had built a life on her own terms, and people were drawn to her strength and authenticity. But while Mary was thriving professionally, her relationship with her children continued to evolve in unexpected ways. One evening, while Mary was in the studio preparing for an exhibition, she received a call from Michael. His voice sounded different, softer, more vulnerable than the confident tone he once used. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he began. "It's been hard for me to admit this, but I've realized something. I've taken you for granted for so many years. I thought I knew what was best for you, but I see now how wrong I was. I want to make things right." Mary paused for a moment, her hand resting on a canvas she had been working on. She had always known that Michael carried guilt over their strained relationship, but hearing his words brought something different, sincere regret, a willingness to grow. "Michael, I'm proud of the man you've become," Mary said, her voice steady but kind. "And I've always loved you, but I had to walk away and do what was best for me. I can't go back to what we had, but we can start anew." There was silence on the other end of the line, followed by a quiet sniffle. "I understand, Mom," Michael finally said. "I've made mistakes, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. And I'm sorry I didn't realize how much you needed me before." "Thank you, Michael," Mary replied softly. "It's going to take time, but I'm open to a new kind of relationship. One where we respect each other's space and choices." In that moment, Mary realized that their relationship would never be the same as it once was, but that didn't mean it couldn't be something new and meaningful. As Mary reflected on her journey, she realized how much had changed in such a short time. She had spent so many years prioritizing the needs of others, often sacrificing her own happiness and desires. Her children had once been the center of her world, and while they still held a place in her heart, she had come to understand that she, too, was worthy of love and care. She thought back to the time when her life felt so confined, when she believed that her role as a mother defined her existence. She realized now that while motherhood was an incredible gift, it was not her only identity. She was an artist, a traveler, a woman who had the right to choose her path. In the weeks following her reconciliation with Michael, Mary found herself reconnecting with old friends and family members who had always admired her quiet strength. These relationships had been left on the back burner during her years of caregiving, but now they were blossoming once more. She had the time, the energy, and the space to nurture them, and it filled her heart in ways she hadn't expected. One of the greatest adventures Mary embarked on in her later years was a solo trip to Japan. She had always admired the country's art, culture, and natural beauty, but had never had the opportunity to visit. Now, with the freedom to travel, she took the plunge, spending weeks exploring ancient temples, capturing the delicate beauty of cherry blossoms, and attending traditional tea ceremonies. It was during this trip that Mary met a group of senior travelers who were also exploring Japan, and they quickly formed a bond. The group consisted of men and women from all walks of life, all seeking something new in their later years. They shared stories of their travels, their struggles, and their dreams, and for the first time, Mary realized she wasn't alone in this journey of self-discovery. One evening, as they sat around a fire on the edge of a serene lake, Mary shared her story with them. She spoke of the challenges she had faced, the betrayals from her family, and how she had learned to live for herself. "I didn't think it was possible to start over," Mary said, her voice carrying the weight of her experiences. But I've learned that life can begin at any age, as long as we allow ourselves to embrace it. The others nodded in understanding, and for that moment, Mary felt a sense of peace. She had truly found her tribe, people who understood that it was never too late to begin again, to live for oneself, and to find joy in the process. Years passed, and Mary continued to paint, travel, and live life on her own terms. Her children, too, had learned to accept her independence. Michael and Susan both respected her choices, and though their relationships weren't perfect, they had grown to understand the importance of honoring Mary's life decisions. At the age of 80, Mary stood at her final exhibition, which was being held at a prestigious gallery in Paris. Her paintings, full of vibrant colors and raw emotion, spoke of the journey she had taken, a journey from self-sacrifice to self-discovery. The exhibition was a tribute to her strength, resilience, and unwavering belief in the possibility of new beginnings. As she looked around at the crowd of admirers, critics, and fellow artists, Mary felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had created more than just art. She had created a life. Her story, once marked by sacrifice and loss, had transformed into one of independence, freedom, and joy. She had spent her later years not looking back but moving forward, embracing every challenge and every opportunity with open arms. As the years passed after Mary's death, her legacy continued to live on in the people she touched. Her children, Michael and Susan, kept her memory alive in their own ways. Michael, who had once been consumed by guilt, found himself deeply inspired by his mother's life. He had started volunteering at a local senior community center, encouraging older adults to pursue their passions and to never let age define their potential. He often spoke about Mary's transformation and how it had changed his perspective on life. Susan, on the other hand, had rekindled her own creative interests, something she had abandoned long ago in favor of her career and family. She took up writing, inspired by the letters and journals Mary had left behind. Susan's first book, Embracing the Now, Finding Yourself Later in Life, was published to great acclaim. It told the story of how Mary had rediscovered herself and the courage it took to rebuild her life after decades of putting others first. Years after Mary's passing, an exhibition of her art was held at the prestigious New York City Museum of Art. The exhibition was aptly titled The Last Chapter, The Life and Legacy of Mary Thompson, and showcased not only her art, but also the story of her remarkable transformation. The museum displayed Mary's early paintings, pieces filled with bold strokes and bright colors, next to the softer, more introspective works she had created later in life. Her final works, abstract landscapes and portraits that captured both the fragility and the strength of the human spirit, were a testament to her growth and her journey. Michael and Susan attended the exhibition, side by side, no longer burdened by the past. They had reconciled in the years after Mary's death, their relationship growing deeper as they both worked through their own healing processes. Standing in front of one of their mother's final pieces, The Light After Darkness, they both understood the depth of their mother's legacy. They could feel her presence in every stroke of paint, in every carefully crafted detail. Susan whispered, "She always saw beauty in the struggle, didn't she?" Michael nodded. "Yeah. She taught us that every hardship is just part of the story, part of the process." The exhibition received not only admiration, but also critical acclaim, cementing Mary Thompson's place as one of the most significant late-blooming artists of her time. Her works were purchased by art collectors and displayed in galleries worldwide. But the true gift of the exhibition was not in the sales or the acclaim, it was in the stories it inspired. In the years following Mary's passing, a fund was established in her honor, the Silver Dreams Fund. It was dedicated to supporting senior artists and creatives who, like Mary, had found their passion later in life. The fund provided grants to help older artists pursue their craft, whether it be in visual arts, writing, photography, or music. The fund became a community of people who, inspired by Mary's life, were determined to prove that age was no barrier to creativity. Grants were awarded to hundreds of artists, each of whom shared their unique stories and journeys of rediscovery. Many of them had faced the same struggles as Mary, feeling invisible or overlooked as they grew older, struggling to find a way to continue their creative work. But through the Silver Dreams Fund, they found support, encouragement, and a platform to share their voices. At the annual Silver Dreams Gala, a new generation of artists gathered to celebrate their shared experiences. As Mary's children, Michael and Susan, stood together at the event one year, they realized how much their mother had impacted the world. Susan gave a speech, her voice steady and proud. "My mother taught me that it's never too late to live your truth. She showed me that life is a constant journey of reinvention, and that no matter how old you are, you can always start again." This fund, this community, is a tribute to her and to all those who, like her, believe that creativity knows no age limit. Many years after Mary's death, a letter was discovered in one of her journals, addressed to Michael and Susan. It was dated just a few months before she passed away. "My dears, as I write this, I feel a sense of peace. I've lived a full life, one that has been filled with both joy and sorrow, love and loss. But the most important thing I have learned is this, that we are not defined by the roles we play for others, but by the life we create for ourselves. For so many years, I was defined by my role as a mother, a wife, a caregiver. And I loved those roles dearly. But I also learned that it's okay to put yourself first, to pursue your own passions, and to live for yourself. I hope that you both know how deeply I loved you, even when I was distant or quiet. And I hope you carry that love with you as you move through your own lives. But more importantly, I hope you both understand that the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to live authentically. Live for yourselves, my children. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait for permission. Your lives are your own to shape. With all my love, Mom." When Michael and Susan read this letter, they both sat in silence, tears in their eyes. It was as though Mary had reached out to them from beyond, offering them the final lesson she had learned. The lesson of living for oneself, without regret, without guilt. As the years went by, the legacy of Mary Thompson continued to grow. Her children, Michael and Susan, had found their own paths to fulfillment, but it wasn't just their lives that had been changed by Mary. The people she had met along the way, those who had been touched by her story, continued to carry her lessons with them. Her life had sparked a movement, one that encouraged older generations to shed the weight of society's expectations and embrace their passions, no matter their age. One day, at a community center dedicated to helping seniors find creative outlets, a young woman approached Susan with a framed painting in her hands. The painting was abstract, full of color, and it had an energy that immediately reminded Susan of her mother's work. "Is this?" Susan asked, her voice faltering. The woman smiled softly, her eyes full of admiration. "It's a piece I did in honor of your mother. I was one of the first recipients of the Silver Dreams Fund. Your mother's story inspired me to pick up a paintbrush again, something I hadn't done in decades." Susan's heart swelled with emotion as she gazed at the painting. It was clear that this woman, like so many others, had been touched by her mother's legacy in a way that would ripple out to others for generations. This was the kind of impact Mary had always wanted, to help others find their own voice, their own passion. The day came when the Silver Dreams Fund held its first international exhibition. Artists from all over the world, most of them older than 60, came to showcase their work. The event was held in a grand gallery in New York, and it was nothing short of extraordinary. The walls were adorned with stunning photographs, paintings, sculptures, and digital art. Every piece told a story of reinvention, of starting over, of finding one's true self later in life. At the opening ceremony, Michael and Susan were invited to speak, as the fund had been created in honor of their mother's legacy. Michael stood on stage, looking out at the crowd of talented seniors, many of whom had found their creativity later in life. He cleared his throat and began speaking. Many of us are told, as we age, that our time for change is over. That we should settle into our roles and accept the limitations that come with age. But my mother, Mary Thompson, showed us that it's never too late. Never too late to dream, never too late to create, and never too late to live a life full of meaning. Susan followed, her voice filled with warmth and conviction. My mother believed in the power of reinvention. She proved that it's never too late to rediscover what makes you feel alive. This fund was born out of her belief that creativity knows no age limit, and I'm so proud to see it flourish in the way it has. As they spoke, a ripple of applause spread through the crowd, a testament to the lives Mary had touched, some directly, and some through the creative grants provided by the Silver Dreams Fund. The exhibition was not only a celebration of the art that had come from it, but a celebration of life, of reinvention, and of living authentically at any age. In the quiet of her studio one evening, years after the exhibition, Susan found a box of her mother's old letters. Most of them were to friends, family, and colleagues, but one letter stood out. It was written in Mary's unmistakable handwriting, addressed to whomever finds this. With trembling hands, Susan opened the letter and read it aloud, as if her mother's voice were speaking to her from beyond. To my dear future self, to those who will read this letter long after I am gone. I hope that you continue to live boldly and without hesitation. Never allow age to dictate the kind of life you can lead. Life is not about waiting for the end. It is about living until the very end. I know I've made mistakes and I've fallen short at times. But I have always learned and I have always grown. And I want you to remember that growth doesn't stop at any particular age. It continues always. I hope that those who come after me, my children, my grandchildren, and everyone who hears my story will understand that it is never too late to start anew. You are not defined by the roles you play for others, but by the life you choose for yourself. Do not let the world tell you when you are too old to chase your dreams. Live your truth, and never forget that every day is a new opportunity to begin again. With love, Mary Thompson. Tears welled up in Susan's eyes as she read the last line. Her mother's words, written so many years ago, still held the same power today. They were a reminder that no matter how much time passed, the chance to start over, to live fully, and to create never ceased. In her later years, Susan had found peace. She had continued writing, and her work had inspired countless others to chase their dreams. She knew, deep down, that her mother's legacy was more than just about art. It was about freedom. The freedom to live without the burden of expectations, the freedom to love without conditions, and the freedom to create with purpose. On the final day of her life, Susan sat in her favorite chair by the window, a book of Mary's letters in her lap. She smiled as she thought of everything her mother had given her, the lessons, the strength, and, above all, the courage to live authentically. Her children, now grown, stood nearby, their faces a blend of admiration and love. They, too, had learned the lessons Mary had taught them, and they carried her legacy in their hearts. As Susan took her last breath, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had lived a full, vibrant life, and she was at peace knowing that her mother's light would continue to shine through her work, her family, and everyone whose life she had touched. As the years passed since Susan's passing, the Silver Dreams Fund expanded beyond anything Mary or her children could have imagined. What had started as a small initiative in honor of one woman's journey became a global movement. From New York to Tokyo, Paris to Sydney, the message of pursuing one's passions later in life spread far and wide. The fund provided financial support, mentorship, and creative opportunities for senior artists, writers, photographers, and musicians, anyone who believed their time had come to shine. A growing network of supporters, all united by the lessons Mary had taught, formed a vibrant community of older creatives. The fund's annual events, where seniors from around the world gathered to celebrate their work, became a cornerstone of this movement. These exhibitions were no longer just about showcasing art. They were about living fully, in every sense of the word. One such event, held in Los Angeles, featured an unexpected guest, Anna, an 85-year-old poet who had just published her first collection of poems. Her book, Echoes of Time, had been lauded for its lyrical beauty and poignant reflections on aging, loss, and rebirth. She stood at the podium at the opening reception, looking out at the sea of faces in the crowd. "I never thought I would be standing here, reading my words to a room full of people," Anna began, her voice steady despite the years of silence she had spent in her own mind. "But I am here because of one woman who taught me that it's never too late to write the story of your life." Mary Thompson believed that we are not defined by the years behind us, but by the moments we still have to live. The crowd cheered, and Anna smiled. Her words echoed Mary's because of Mary. Anna had found her voice, and through the Silver Dreams Fund, she had discovered a community that believed in her, even when she hadn't believed in herself. Years later, Michael and Susan's children, now adults with families of their own, stood at the helm of the Silver Dreams Fund, taking the mantle from their parents. Mary's grandchildren, who had witnessed their grandmother's transformation firsthand, understood the importance of her mission and had devoted themselves to the fund's expansion. They worked tirelessly to continue spreading her message, reaching out to even more communities across the globe. One day, Michael's daughter, Lily, stood before the crowd at an international Silver Dreams event in London. She was young, full of energy, and driven by a passion for creating opportunities for the elderly to express themselves through the arts. "We are here today to honor a woman whose vision has changed the way we see age, creativity, and the power of reinvention," Lily said. "My grandmother, Mary Thompson, didn't just leave behind a legacy of art, she left behind a legacy of freedom, a freedom that comes from living life authentically and passionately, no matter where you are in your journey." The room went silent for a moment before the applause erupted. Mary's grandchildren had taken her spirit and turned it into something far beyond what she could have imagined, a movement of people, old and young, learning from her story and carrying it into the future. By the time Mary's great-grandchildren reached adulthood, the world had changed. Society had begun to understand the value of older generations, not as burdens, but as beacons of wisdom, creativity, and experience. The idea that it was never too late to follow your dreams had become a cultural norm, a truth embraced across the globe. The Silver Dreams Fund was now part of every major city's cultural calendar, with exhibitions, workshops, and conferences celebrating senior artists from every corner of the earth. At the age of 100, Mary's great-granddaughter, Clara, stood in front of a crowd at the opening of the largest Silver Dreams exhibition to date, a worldwide collaboration showcasing the work of over 500 senior artists. Clara, who had grown up hearing stories of her great-grandmother's journey, was now leading a team that organized this event, bringing together hundreds of seniors to share their art and their stories. "My great-grandmother, Mary Thompson, taught us that age is not a limitation," Clara said, her voice strong and filled with pride. "She showed us that creativity is timeless, and our passion can continue to grow and evolve no matter how many years we live." As Clara spoke, the audience filled with senior artists, many of them standing proudly beside their works, knowing that they, too, had the chance to make their mark on the world. Some had spent their lives raising children, others working tirelessly in jobs they didn't love, but through the Silver Dreams Fund, they had found their way back to their passions, and now they were sharing their creativity with the world. While Mary Thompson's physical presence had long since passed, her influence remained an unshakable foundation. Her life had proved that there was no age limit to creativity, and her story inspired not just the seniors who followed her, but also future generations who carried her lessons forward. As time passed, a statue was erected in Mary's honor in the city where she had lived her final years. The statue stood in a park that had been transformed into an open-air museum for senior artists. It was a place where anyone, regardless of age, could come to create, learn, and celebrate their artistic endeavors. The inscription on the statue read, "For Mary Thompson, who taught us that it is never too late to live a life of passion and purpose." And in that park, people would come from all walks of life to honor her legacy, seniors and children alike, sharing stories, creating art, and passing on the lessons Mary had instilled in them. Her journey, once thought to be a personal tale of reinvention, had become a universal truth that we all have the power to reinvent ourselves, to live authentically, and to create no matter how old we are. Many years after the statue of Mary Thompson had been erected in the park, a young art student named Ella stumbled upon it while walking through the city. She was visiting the museum for a class project, her thoughts swirling with doubt about her own future as an artist. She'd always been told that young artists had their time to shine, and after graduation, the path ahead seemed uncertain. Seeing the statue, she couldn't help but feel drawn to it. Ella spent the afternoon sitting by the statue, sketching its contours in her notebook, lost in the significance of the woman it represented. The plaque beneath the statue captured Mary's words, "It is never too late to live a life of passion and purpose." Ella had heard of Mary Thompson before. Her story was legendary in the art community, but she hadn't really understood its full impact until this moment. As Ella gazed at the statue, she thought about how her own dreams seemed so far away and how society often told her that success had a shelf life. But as the afternoon sun bathed the park in a warm, golden glow, she felt something stir within her, a spark of hope, perhaps, or inspiration. Inspired by the legacy of Mary Thompson, Ella decided to take a leap of faith. She returned to her small apartment that night, determined to push past her self-doubt and embrace her passion for painting, just as Mary had done. Ella had spent years putting her art on the back burner, constantly chasing after the approval of others. But in that quiet moment by the statue, she realized that true fulfillment could only come from living for herself. Ella started painting again with renewed purpose. She devoted her weekends to creating abstract landscapes and portraits, often drawing from the themes of time and transformation that Mary's work had captured so beautifully. The more she painted, the more she realized that her creative journey was just beginning, not ending. Her world no longer felt limited by her age or the need for external validation. Ella now painted for herself, just as Mary had. A few months later, after showing her work to a few local galleries, Ella received her first exhibition offer. It was a small gallery in a quiet corner of the city, but to Ella, it felt like the beginning of everything. She thought back to that day in the park, sitting by the statue of Mary Thompson, and smiled. She knew that Mary's story was more than just a tale of personal reinvention. It was a story of hope, of defying expectations, and of embracing the power within ourselves, no matter how old or young we might be. As Ella's career blossomed, she began to share her journey with others, often telling the story of how Mary Thompson's legacy had ignited her own path. In interviews and at art events, she would speak about the statue, the inscription, and how Mary's message had inspired her to reclaim her creativity. Through her work, Ella encouraged many other older artists who had spent years sidelining their passions to return to their craft. She helped facilitate workshops for senior artists, many of whom had lived with regret for not pursuing their creative dreams earlier in life. Ella's exhibitions also became spaces where stories of reinvention were shared and celebrated. These events were not just about showcasing art, they were about empowering people to believe that it was never too late to rediscover their purpose. Over the years, Mary Thompson's story continued to inspire generations, young and old. The Silver Dreams Fund had been a driving force in helping seniors around the world find their voices again, whether through painting, writing, music, or photography. But the most profound impact was not just in the art created, it was in the lives transformed. People like Ella, whose dreams had once seemed out of reach, were now embracing their creativity with the full knowledge that age did not define their potential. As the years continued to pass, the city decided to honor the incredible impact of Mary Thompson by creating not just a statue, but an entire cultural center in her name. The Mary Thompson Creative Arts Center was established as a hub for artists of all ages, with a special focus on providing resources for senior creatives. It was a place where older artists could come to share their work, mentor younger generations, and continue to grow their artistic skills. The opening ceremony of the center was held on a crisp autumn day, with an enormous crowd gathered in celebration. The event featured a gallery filled with works from senior artists across the world and speeches from those who had been most deeply impacted by Mary's life and mission. Ella was invited to speak at the ceremony. Standing at the podium, she looked out over the crowd, her heart full of gratitude. Mary Thompson didn't just teach us to follow our dreams, she taught us that our dreams are worth following at any stage of life. And the legacy she left behind is not just in the art we create, but in the belief that we can always begin again, no matter the challenges we face. As she spoke, she could see the faces of the people in the audience, artists, creatives, older and younger alike, each of them carrying the spark of possibility in their eyes. The Mary Thompson Creative Arts Center was a living testament to the legacy of a woman who had changed the way the world viewed aging and creativity. And it was here, in this center, that future generations of artists would continue to find the courage to pursue their dreams, inspired by the woman who had shown them all that it was never too late. In the quiet of her home, Mary's great-grandchildren, now young adults, looked through old photo albums and letters from Mary. They had heard stories about their great-grandmother's journey, but now they were old enough to understand the depth of her impact. They had grown up in a world where creativity had no age restrictions, and they had been encouraged to pursue their passions from an early age, inspired by the legacy Mary had built. One evening, as they sat around the kitchen table, one of Mary's great-grandsons, now a budding filmmaker, shared an idea. What if we made a documentary about Grandma Mary's story? About how she showed the world that it's never too late to create. The family loved the idea, and soon, they began working on the project together. The documentary would explore not only Mary's life, but the ripple effect of her legacy, the stories of artists and creatives who had been inspired by her journey. As the camera crew followed Mary's family and the senior artists connected to the Silver Dreams Fund, it became clear that her influence was still growing, reaching new generations of dreamers. It wasn't just about preserving Mary's story, it was about continuing to spread her message. The documentary premiered to great acclaim, and as it was screened in communities around the world, it inspired countless viewers to start their own journeys of creativity, no matter how old they were. Mary's story had come full circle, touching lives and creating waves of transformation that would carry on for generations to come. In the years that followed, the Mary Thompson Creative Arts Center became a bustling hub of creativity, with artists from all walks of life coming together to share their talents. The center continued to thrive, funding countless projects for seniors who wanted to start their creative journeys. On special occasions, the park where Mary's statue stood was filled with people, young, old, and in between, all celebrating the power of art and the freedom to create at any age. Children played in the grass nearby, while older artists set up easels to paint, each person contributing to the ever-growing tapestry of life that Mary had inspired. Mary Thompson's legacy, built on creativity, independence, and the belief that it's never too late to pursue your dreams, lived on in the hearts of all those who followed her example. Her story had transformed not just the art world, but the way the world viewed aging and creativity. And so, Mary's journey continued, not as a single story, but as a universal truth, a truth that echoed through generations, inspiring every person who came to believe that it was never, ever too late to create, to live, and to dream.